I used to think light was just what happened when you asked to switch a simple question. On or off? Yes or no? Day or night? Then I took apart a blown bulb on a Sunday I couldn't afford to waste, and I learned light is a bargain. Heat for brightness, time for clarity, life for a moment when everything makes sense. A filament glows because it's dying beautifully. That's what my foreman said the first week I started at Edison and Lake, Detroit, 1947. He laughed when he said it, like men do when they're telling the truth and don't want to be caught. My name is Tom. I was 23, a machinist by pay grade and an engineer by stubbornness. I swept floors to get on the line, then lingered near the testing bench until the senior men started asking me to hold things. I learned the numbers, resistivity, expansion, the way tungsten remembers heat like a scar. Nights, I read borrowed textbooks until the tables turned into lullabies. Days, I watched bulbs fail in the proof racks. Pop, dim, sigh, and I kept 2 notebooks, one for the facts and one for the ideas I wasn't supposed to have. The idea was simple enough to sound foolish. A lamp that would last so long people would forget where they'd bought it. Not unbreakable. Nothing is, but nearly unburnoutable. A different alloy for the filament, a gentler inrush when you flip the switch, a way to keep the glass from clouding with the ghosts of its own metal. The older fellows said a long-life lamp was bad business. You plan to feed yourself on congratulations? One asked. Maybe I did. That winter, I started sneaking up to the roof during lunch to test the prototypes I couldn't admit existed. Detroit roofs are not romantic. Not in February, but they tell the truth. I wired my little monsters to a battery box and a rheostat, shielded them from the wind with an upturned crate, and watched the filaments bloom like tiny orange weeds. If the glass stayed clear after an hour, I drew a star in the margin. If it blackened, I wrote the date and a word my mother wouldn't have liked. That's where I first met Susan, on the stairs to the roof, her arms full of fabric, her breath rising in the cold like a second person. She worked 2 buildings over at D&R Garments, hemming work shirts and repairing cuffs for men who didn't know how to stop using their hands. On her breaks, she climbed to the top to eat where the city looked like a promise. I could tell she'd been standing up all day. The way she sat on the tar, careful and grateful, told me everything. You're the lamp boy, she said, without introduction. I should have minded the boy. I didn't. I am, I said. What are you doing up here? Trying to coax a longer life out of something that wants to burn itself out. She smiled at that, slowly, like she was deciding whether to let me have it. Aren't we all? We started sharing the roof. I'd bring 2 apples. She'd bring 2 cookies wrapped in wax paper. I'd check the leads, she'd watch the glow, and sometimes we wouldn't speak for minutes at a time, which is how I knew we could. There are people you have to fill the air for, or they'll leave. There are others you can be quiet with, and the silence doesn't punish you. She lived with her mother in a brick duplex near the tracks, over a store that sold hardware and advice. Her father had died before the war, which made her a different kind of old. She read library books about cities she had no time to visit and could fix a singer by listening to its cough. When stitches went crooked, she'd pull them out with a patience that scared me. You don't learn that kind of gentleness unless life has already taught you its opposite. Why light? She asked one afternoon, the wind fingering her hair like it had been allowed. Because it's honest, I said. It tells you exactly how hard it's working. You can see it. It doesn't pretend. Cloth lies, she said, not unkindly. You can hide a lot in a seam. We grew the way proper things do, slowly, with attention. I walked her home once, twice, then always. We didn't hold hands the first dozen nights. When we finally did, it was because a curb was higher than it looked and her balance needed mine. That felt like the right reason. Her mother watched me from the kitchen the way mothers do when they've already decided whether you're trouble and are now looking for evidence to support their verdict. She liked that I took my hat off without being told. She liked that I ate what I was given. She liked that I looked at Susan when she spoke, and at the floor when I didn't know what to say. By spring, My notebook had more stars than curses. I had a filament that would accept a softer start if the circuit would offer it. I had a getter arrangement that kept the glass clear longer than anything I should have known how to build. I had a story I could tell to a man with money. Less failure, fewer returns, a savings so large it would feel like generosity. I told Susan the numbers. She didn't blink. "So what happens when you sell a bulb that never dies?" she asked. "I make less of them," I said. "But we make the world better." "You don't make the world better by putting people out of work," she said. And then she smiled so I'd know she wasn't ending anything. "But you might make it kinder. And people find new work when they must." "The foreman says the consortium will never allow it," I said. "They like their billables predictable." "Do you?" she asked. "No," I said. "But I like eating." We were still laughing on the roof when Mr. Halpern from purchasing walked through the door with his hat on indoors, which meant he had news. He had a way of smiling that made you feel as if you owed him something for the privilege of being near it. "Kid," he said. He didn't know my name and didn't need to. "There's a fellow from General Electro West in town next Tuesday. He's sniffing around for talent." I told him we had a boy with smart fingers. I didn't say more. Don't make me a liar. "General Electro?" I repeated. My mouth had gone dry in the common way of dreams. "New Brunswick," he said, like it was a hymn. "They're building a team. Real money. Real labs. None of this roof nonsense. You bring a suit you didn't buy yesterday, and you keep your mouth on the right side of what you don't know, and maybe they'll buy you dinner." When he left, Susan sat with me in the wind that wasn't cold anymore. She didn't touch my hand. She didn't congratulate me. She watched the little bulb steady itself at a costly brightness and said, "New Brunswick is a far walk. It's a train ride," I said, as if trains were bridges you could cross without burning anything behind you. "And your mother?" she asked. "Your sister and the boy?" "They'll be fine," I said too quickly. My mother had hips that sang sadly when she stood. My sister had a boy who thought stairs were games. None of that fit in my suitcase. "And me?" she asked, so softly the question landed after its echo. The bulb hummed. The roof collected the city's heat and let it go like it had been practicing all winter. "I don't know," I said, and hated myself for the honesty that made me worthy of her. "Then say that," she said. "And don't say anything else you can't build." We went to the automat that night because it was the kind of future that kept you in the present. Little windows, hot pies, coins that made machines trust you. We sat by the glass and watched other people's reflections choose them. She told me her mother's cough had grown stubborn again. I told her the new alloy held shape better than sense. We didn't make promises, which was its own kind of vow. The interview was at a hotel with carpet so thick it tried to keep your secrets. They put me in a chair that softened my back and offered me coffee I shouldn't have accepted. The men from GW asked the right questions. Not what, but why. Not how, but how long. They asked about my 2 notebooks. I told them I had one. They smiled without showing teeth. "Your ideas want oxygen," the youngest one said, flipping my sketch of the inrush limiter as if it were already his. "We have oxygen. And altitude," the oldest added. "You can't see the shape of a river from the bank." They offered a salary that didn't make me dizzy because I had anticipated what men like that offered and set my dizziness aside like a childish thing. They offered a lab. They offered a team that wouldn't grit its teeth when I found a new way to say an old thing. They offered a train ticket with a date printed on it that looked like a dare. At the door, the young one put a hand on my elbow, not a friend's touch, but a shepherd's, and said, "Ambition goes where it's fed. Don't let yours starve out of politeness." I walked home slower than men who've just been told they matter are supposed to. I passed the testing racks and listened to lamps live out their short, bright lives. I turned the last corner and saw Susan on the steps of her building, a scarf around her head like a promise to the wind. "Well?" she asked. "They want me," I said. "Of course they do," she said. "You're good." And I asked, because I was a child again and needed an adult to tell me which toy I was allowed to take. And the train leaves on the 15th, I said. 2 weeks. She nodded as if that was exactly the time it always took for a heart to decide whether it preferred light or warmth. Walk me, she said. We took the long way, where the streetlights lined up like a string of small moons we didn't have to own. We didn't say much. We didn't have to. She knew the geometry of a goodbye you try not to name. I knew the arithmetic of a choice that didn't leave remainders. At her door, she touched the place on my chest where the notebooks rested when I forgot to leave them at the shop. Whatever you do, she said, do it so I can still recognize you when you come back. When I come back, I repeated. She smiled with her eyes. You can go and still belong. People do it all the time. Just make sure the thing you're building won't make you someone I wouldn't sit beside. I wanted to tell her I would choose her if choosing were that simple. I wanted to tell her the light in my head wasn't brighter than the light in her kitchen window when I passed. I wanted to say all the sentences men write in letters they never send. Instead, I said the only true thing I had left. I don't know how to be both, I said. Then learn, she answered, and kissed my cheek where the air could see it. That night, I took the little roof bulb off its wires and set it on my dresser like a moon I could pocket. It glowed for a while on the memory of current. Afterglow, the textbooks called it, then surrendered to its hunger for darkness. I lay awake and watched the ceiling wait. 2 weeks, she had said, and the date agreed. I fell asleep counting filaments. I woke knowing the train's number. And all day, the factory hummed like a question I wasn't ready to answer. The morning I told Susan I was leaving, the roof was quiet. No lamp. No wind. Just her, standing in the same spot where we used to test filaments. She was holding a thermos in both hands like it held more than heat. She didn't ask how the meeting went. She didn't need to. They gave me a lab, I said. She nodded. They said I'd be working with people who don't waste time making things pretty. She raised an eyebrow. You're going? I think I have to. She unscrewed the thermos cap and poured me some coffee. Then drink this before it gets cold. Like everything else. We sat on the crate where I used to rest my prototype. I wanted to say something big, something final and brave. But the words wouldn't line up. Instead, I said, I'll write you. She smiled faintly. You will for a while. And I'll come back. She didn't laugh. She just said, then leave something behind. So you have a reason to return. I gave her my notebook. The one with stars in the margins, and fingerprints on every idea that hadn't yet found a future. She held it like a mirror. You're sure? I nodded. If I lose myself over there, that's who I was. You'll know what mattered. The train left at 7:12 a.m. sharp. I stood between my mother and my sister Ruth on the platform. Benny, my nephew, waved with both hands like he was trying to stop the train with joy. Susan wasn't there. That was her way. She hated goodbyes that pretended not to be. But when the train curved past DNR Garments, I saw her, on the roof, standing beside one of my old test lamps. It was glowing, steady, unblinking, waiting. New Brunswick was cleaner than Detroit and 3 times quieter. The GW facility looked like a university that charged ambition instead of tuition. They gave me a white lab coat and a polished bench. 2 other engineers, both with smiles trained for meetings, asked if I liked coffee or quiet. I chose quiet. The work was good. Too good. No distractions. No roof. Only numbers. Charts. Profit models. We made the long-life lamp better. Cheaper to produce. Easier to scale. But every time the prototype passed a stress test, something inside me bent a little out of shape. Then came the meeting. A white-haired man with a voice like sandpaper asked, "Why build a bulb that never burns out?" I said what I believed. Because some light should last longer than the room it's in. He blinked. Then he said, "And who profits from that?" The following week, a memo landed on my desk. The long-life lamp would be introduced as a luxury product, premium price, limited run. They called it a controlled revolution. One that wouldn't hurt the sales of disposable bulbs too much. I stared at the page. This wasn't what I built. This was safety, dressed as progress. That night, I opened my suitcase and found the old roof bulb I'd brought with me. I plugged it in beside my bed and watched it glow, faint but stubborn, like it was refusing to forget where it came from. I thought of Susan, of her mother, of Mr. Klein and his hardware store, of the notebook she now held, and whether it still felt warm from my hands. And then I bought a return ticket, just for a weekend, just to breathe Detroit air again, just to see her. At the door of her building, I didn't knock. I waited. Eventually, she opened it. Her eyes didn't widen. She just leaned against the frame like she'd expected this exact moment. Not sooner, not later. I didn't send a letter, I said. I know, she replied. I didn't write because I was ashamed. Then you're back for the right reason. I handed her the small, cracked test bulb. It's not perfect, I said, but it still works. She took it gently. So do you, she whispered. And the porch light flickered on, not above us, but between. Part 3, Hold Time. I didn't tell anyone in New Brunswick I was gone. I left the lab light on, the way we do when we mean to be back before the coffee cools. The overnight train hummed like a good secret. I slept in braided pieces and dreamed in schematics, bridges and soft starts and faces that didn't fit on paper. Detroit greeted me with the smell of warm iron. The city may have been chipped in places, but it never pretended. I walked the old route without thinking. Station, river, Mr. Klein's hardware, the back alley that borrowed the bakery's heat even after the ovens went cold. I stood across from Susan's building and listened to the afternoon decide what kind of evening to become. She opened the door before I knocked. You look like you've been arguing with numbers, she said. Did they win? They always do, until they meet the right story, I said, and we both smiled because we knew numbers and stories shared a spine when you traced them with your fingers slowly enough. She let me in. The singer was quiet for once. Her mother dozed in the bedroom with the radio on low, the announcer kindly losing a game no one in the apartment was playing. I set the little cracked bulb on the table between us. She set a cup of tea beside it. You said you were ashamed, she reminded me gently. I built something to be ordinary, I said. They want it to be special. Expensive. A halo you rent. And your part in that, she asked. I could help them polish the halo, I said. Or I could refuse and be replaced by someone who won't think twice. She thought for a while, then nodded as if agreeing with the slow math of rain. Either way, a choice. I took out the memo, the one that put a tuxedo on a light bulb, and slid it across. She read it, lips moving a little, the way people read when they want to be kind to the words even if they don't deserve it. I won't tell you what to do, she said at last. I'm not the person you're choosing between. You are exactly that person, I said. She shook her head. No, Tom. You're choosing between the work you believe in and the way the world is willing to carry it. I'm only asking that whichever you pick, you can still recognize yourself in daylight. I laughed small. You always make ethics sound like laundry. They are, she said. You wash what you can. You wear it again. You don't pretend stains are silk. We didn't talk much after that. We didn't have to. I fixed her mother's loose radio knob, and she reheated a soup that tasted like patience. When I left, she handed me the notebook I'd given her before the train eased. Take it, she said. You'll need the version of you that drew stars. On the street, I flipped it open. A pressed ticket stub fell out. Our rooftop automat, months ago. She must have saved it. On the back, in her careful hand, build what keeps you kind. Back in New Brunswick, the lab smelled like ozone and pressure. Egan lifted his eyebrows when I walked in. So, he said, did you remember your name? I remembered hers, I said. He nodded as if those were the same project. The consortium's decision arrived the following Monday. Proceed with controlled release. The memo had the tone of a wedding announcement written by a lawyer. Morales read it, whistled something minor, and said, Well, kid, looks like we're making the future smaller. I took the night to think, which means I let the ceiling argue and the window referee. In the morning, I asked for 10 minutes with the division head. He gave me 5 and a stare. I'll lead the launch, I told him. I'll smile in the pictures. I'll make the lamp sing. He waited for the but. Men like him have learned the weight of that word and how to let it hit the desk without flinching. But I won't say it's rare, I continued. Not in public, not in private. I won't help you turn a kindness into a luxury. If you need a different face, say so. He looked at me like a man considers a lift that might drop him. You'll take your name off the patents? He asked softly. No, I said. I'll take my mouth off the lie. A long silence. Then, we don't pay for sermons here. I'm not preaching, I said. I'm adjusting the circuit. Reducing inrush. Lowering the surge that would fry something we might want later. Plainly, he said. Plainly? I took a breath. I'll do the work. I won't do the pretending. He dismissed me with a flick, but not the cruel kind. The kind that means you have made my day harder, and I respect that more than I'll ever admit. 2 days later, he called me back. You'll keep your lab, he said. You'll keep your mouth. Closed when necessary, open when useful. And you will not contradict our pricing. But you also will not be asked to praise it. That's the best I can do without inventing a new company. It was, improbably enough. We launched in autumn. The long life lamp came in a box with a ribbon printed on it, the kind of packaging that promises permanence you can dust. The ads were vague enough to be safe. A light that stays. A lamp that remembers. No numbers. Plenty of smiles. At the press table, cameras flashed. I spoke about materials and math and the way a filament fails when asked to be a hero every time it wakes. I said nothing about exclusivity. I said everything about mercy. When a reporter asked whether this was a product for the few, I said, light has never belonged to the few. We're just slow at remembering that. The division head pinched the bridge of his nose later and said, You are a difficult employee, Tom. I'm an easy man, I answered. You just have to let me tell the truth in complete sentences. He sighed. Go adjust something. I did. I visited Detroit every other month that year. Sometimes for Ruth and Benny. Sometimes for my mother's stubborn hip. Sometimes for Susan and the way the roof still collected sky like it had a right to. We didn't build a future in words. We practiced one in small tasks. Fixing a window sash, mending a seam, drawing another star in a margin. Some trips we touched hands. Some we didn't. Both kinds counted. One winter weekend, snow made the city gentle. Susan's mother had a good day, and we played gin rummy badly and blamed the cards for what age had done to our wrists. When the house settled into its nighttime creak, Susan and I stood at the back door, watching streetlight turn our breath into telegrams. Marry me, I said, which was not the speech she deserved, but was the truth I had finally learned to say out loud. She didn't answer at once. She touched the doorframe where paint remembered old colors. Can your life come in parts? She asked. Can we be here and there? Or does a lab need all of you to work? It needs the part that believes in useful light, I said. The rest can be with you. She smiled with caution. Then yes. But I'll never be the thing you choose instead of your work. I'll be the reason you do it right. Deal? I said, and we shook like people who understand contracts. We were married that spring in a small church that had more kindness than varnish. Ruth cried. Benny tried not to. Mr. Klein gave us a box with nothing in it, and said, For what you build. My mother danced with me for exactly half a song, and then sat down, satisfied. We made a schedule the way people make bridges, one careful span at a time. I spent 4 weeks in New Brunswick, 2 in Detroit. We rented a small place near the river. She kept the flat above the store until her mother let go. The rhythm wasn't easy, but it was true. When letters were late, we forgave the mail. When trains were late, we forgave the weather. When we were late, we forgave the work. The lamp line grew, not as fast as the salesman wanted, faster than the accountants feared. Cheaper versions followed, not because the consortium fell in love with fairness, but because other companies did the arithmetic and decided they preferred market share to nostalgia. In 5 years, Long Life wasn't a ribbon box anymore. It was a shelf. In 10, it was ordinary. which is all I ever wanted. By then, my name was on papers that other men quoted in rooms I never entered. That felt like the right kind of fame, useful and absent. Sometimes a reporter asked for a photograph. I'd send one of the prototype on a roof instead. The little bulb glowing against February. No faces, just a promise kept. When my mother died, we turned off the porch light for one night because that's what grief asked. The next evening, I replaced the switch with a soft start I had been tinkering toward for years. The filament came up slow, warm, kind. Ruth called it the human way. On our 10th anniversary, Susan handed me the notebook I had given her and then reclaimed and now returned again. There are more stars, she said. Some you drew. Some I did when you forgot to. I opened to the back page. Her handwriting. Light that doesn't hurt to reach. People, too. People ask, sometimes, which I finally chose, love or work. They are younger when they ask. As if life were a switch. I tell them there's a third thing. The way you wire them together so the inrush doesn't scorch either. A resistor of patience. A bridge of mercy. A soft start made of 2 hands and 1 roof, and a city that forgave me for leaving because I kept coming back. When the first long-life street lamps were raised in our neighborhood, we stood under one in winter and watched it lift the dark without glare. Susan took my arm and said, "That's the kind of light I meant." "I know," I said. We walked home slow. I left the porch light on. Not because anyone was out late. Because I liked how the house looked when it remembered we were inside. The bulb warmed the room without hurry. The filament didn't flare. It rose, like a promise kept.